Are you interested in a psychologist's take on the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial? If so, please stay tuned. Let's get into it. I'm Dr. Patrice, a licensed psychologist, and here I share educational content on a variety of topics. I initially didn't really watch the trial. It wasn't something that I knew a lot about, but when Dr. Curry and Dr. Hughes, and then also the psychiatrist from Virginia Beach, when those people came to testify and psychology and diagnosis started to come into play, I was intrigued and wanted to listen in and hear a little bit more. I did not watch the full trial. I did not go back and watch everything. And as I was watching, I was also seeing people's reactions, especially people that have diagnoses of borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder, and then also trauma and abuse survivors. And by the end, I want to make sure to have a message for those people. And I'll go ahead and share it now just to make sure that we get this out of the way. Because somebody has a diagnosis, that does not mean that they wouldn't be believed. Or just because a person has a complicated past, that doesn't mean that a jury would not see them as credible. I wish that the team, and who knows, because I was not there, I do not know what happened behind the scenes, but as a psychologist watching, I was concerned with some of the things that I saw in the trial, and I kind of understand why the jury came to the conclusion that they came to. Amber Heard's side seemed disorganized. The experts seemed to only present one side and to say things that I'm not sure if they were able to actually say. So I have testified in court. And if you're watching this and if you are a mental health professional or if you are ever called in to testify in court, it's really important because you will be asked questions that you might not be able to answer. You'll be asked questions that are outside of your scope. It's really important that when you're asked questions that you manage your own emotions during the whole process. Because if you're called up for one side, the other side's whole goal is going to be to discredit you, to make you look like you don't know what you're talking about. And unfortunately, I think that's what Amber Heard's experts, they ended up being portrayed in a way that had the jury, I'm sure, question some of their credibility. So when the psychiatrist, that was the testimony that I think really went the worst. And he's come out and released some statements just about his own feelings about his testimony. But with his testimony and the way that it came across, me watching as a psychologist that has testified in court before, you would never make some of those jokes. You would never go back and forth. Sitting back watching, I wish that he had taken a breath and taken a moment and thought clearly before saying some of the things that he said. And then also knowing that, hey, this jury is getting the wrong impression or the wrong perception. There were people that were in the courtroom that heard some of the testimony. I was not there. I've watched different commentators talk about how the jury was reacting to each of the experts. I will only speak for me and what I'm comfortable with. So I am not comfortable going up and speaking on a case and giving a recommendation or a diagnosis for somebody that I have not interviewed. Now, forensic psychologist, he is correct. They are trained in how to do that. And yet there are limitations with that. And I don't think that he clearly communicated what the limitations of his assessment were. That he can't say for sure. You're only looking at things from what you had available, and there might be some blind spots, because even when I do meet with somebody and I do an evaluation, there's a chance that the person might have been inaccurate, or they might have been portraying themselves more positively than they actually were. And that's where I think Dr. Hughes' testimony comes in as well, because I think she wholeheartedly, just based on from what I saw, believed that Amber Heard was everything that she said she was. There are some diagnoses that are very common within Hollywood, within actors, And I would be interested to know, and we will never find out, what some of the people that testified after watching their own testimony and watching the testimony of others, if their opinions changed at all throughout this process. As an evaluator, even if I'm called for one particular side, I try to present a balanced perspective and also talk once again about those limitations for what I can and cannot say. And I agree with Dr. Curry that psychologists, I cannot confirm if a event happened or didn't happen. I cannot say with all certainty for sure I know that this occurred or didn't occur. I can say it's more probable than not. I can say these are the reasons that I came to my conclusion, but I cannot say that these things definitely happened because I was not there. So when I write a report and somebody reports something to me, I put reports, allegedly. I use that type of language because I don't know for sure. And I really respected and appreciated the testimony of Dr. Curry because she conducted herself in a way that was extremely professional. She seemed extremely knowledgeable and was able to rattle off and answer the questions in an accurate way. From where I was, it seemed to be a really accurate way. And then when Dr. Hughes was asked questions, she needed to refer to the notes a lot. And I think from where I was watching, it seemed as though the times that there were objections for the reading, I think as a therapist, as a psychologist, there have been times I've been on the stand and situations like that have happened, and it can throw you off your game. So for me personally, what I do is I ground myself. I have to stay grounded because if you get agitated, if you get upset, and if that comes through to the jury, because you're trying to show yourself as a professional and you don't want to show that you are starting to get frustrated. I do think Dr. Curry also showed some frustration, especially with the muffins, but I think even the jury was kind of like, okay, yeah, her husband got the muffins. And so I don't think that hurt her credibility with the jury. I do think that because of what Dr. Curry said, and then when the jury went back and thought about some of the testimony that was given, I could see how the jury could connect some of those dots and possibly think that Dr. Curry gave a more accurate diagnosis versus Dr. Hughes. And in these types of cases, they are always pinning one expert against another. And before I ever accepted a case, I would want to review everything, take a look, okay, and you want to be careful and then decide, am I the right fit for this case? And then also going to the other side and saying, hey, this is what I can and can't say. You normally do some questions. You kind of get an idea, okay, so what type of questions are you going to ask? Here is what I found. This is what I can and cannot say. Here are some concerns that I have. If the other side asks me these types of things, this is what I can and cannot say. And then also in the moment, there are times that you have to on the stand say, that's outside of my scope. I'm not able to give an answer to that because there are questions that are outside of the scope of what an evaluation can actually do. And I don't know that Amber Heard's side, that they did that in a way or communicated that in a way that had the jury believing, especially once the other experts came in. And the other experts, they just were so poised and knowledgeable, and you're just sitting there shaking your head like, yes, that makes sense. Versus the other experts, you're kind of looking at them confused and kind of like, ugh. And they might be presenting information in a way that has the jury questioning their credibility. Once again, I'm just giving my general commentary on this. I don't know what happened. I came into this as a psychology nerd that loves testing. I've given the MMPI and the PAI, the trauma symptom inventory. I know about the trauma questionnaire that they were talking about. So I knew all about these tests that they were discussing. And once again, I could understand how the jury connected with what Dr. Curry was saying and then struggled or might even thought that Dr. Hughes might have not done as thorough of an assessment or of an evaluation, or might have left information out that wasn't consistent with the narrative that Amber Heard's side wanted. And I'm not saying that happened or didn't happen, but I can see how the jury could think, wait a minute, what this other side is saying, that just makes more sense, especially from what they saw. I just think a lot of things that happened, the photos that seem to be very similar, almost the same, a lot of the evidence that came out, it broke my heart for those survivors that also don't have any evidence for what they allege happened. And in our country, unfortunately, we put a lot on the person that is surviving versus on the perpetrator, the person that allegedly did the violence. And it is hard to come up and testify against someone that you care about. It is hard because there is this thing called a trauma bond. And I know that I've worked with people that struggled to come out and testify against people that had harmed them, to even see that there could be anything negative about a person. I really felt for both sides in the midst of all of this, because all of this personal information, these personal recordings were being played for the world to see. And I think the jury saw Johnny Depp accept responsibility for his part. And then I think they saw Amber Heard not really fully explain things like the $7 million pledge or the statements that were made in some of the audio recordings. There are times when people don't answer a question directly. And so you're asked a direct question. Can you explain why you said this or something? And the person says, well, anybody in this situation. And they go around the question, but they don't actually answer it. And to an unskilled person, or to somebody might kind of go on that journey. I think this jury, for 6 weeks, that was a long time hearing a lot of testimony. I think towards the end, I really think they struggled to connect. And there was just so much information and evidence that was coming from all sides that they really made the best decision that they could. I still don't think that people that do have borderline personality disorder, where they might be more likely to have emotional outbursts. So the one thing that I will say is that borderline personality disorder is extremely treatable. The way that I view that diagnosis, I work with people that have that diagnosis, and the way I see it is it's a skills deficit. And this is based on the work of Dr. Marsha Linehan. And it's difficulty managing emotions, tolerating stress, and there are specific skills that Dialectical Behavior Therapy, or DBT, that it teaches to help this person practice mindfulness, being in the moment, to help reduce emotional reactivity. This diagnosis is incredibly treatable. And then also addressing some of the interpersonal deficits. Sometimes this person might try to get their needs met in inappropriate ways. They might engage in behaviors that are manipulative. And I don't like the word manipulative. I like to talk about people getting their needs met the wrong way. But we typically refer to that as manipulation. And those needs are very valid. And a person can have valid needs and address them and get them met and still be able to have safety within their relationships. And so I think that the therapist that recommended that they record their conversations, I believe that was a couples therapist that recommended that. Though I, once again, just based on my watching it, from the peripheral, I think that person wanted them to hear, do you hear how you two talk to each other? I published an article years ago where I recorded a couple because when they would fight, they would, oh my gosh, they would go at it. And so sometimes it's common in couples therapy to recommend that couples, when you're having an argument, go on ahead and just record yourselves and then listen to it later. Listen to your part. Listen to what you said, and let's talk about what you can take responsibility for and how you could because I want each partner to focus on what they can do and not listen to the recording and then find additional things to argue with the person about. So it is common for couples therapists to recommend that people record conversations. I normally did it with a benign topic, like, okay, y'all can't agree on light bulbs. So it wouldn't be like, so if they get into really big arguments over parenting decisions, like don't record that one. Like, let's just talk about something that's a little bit more, and then let me give you some skills. Here are some conflict resolution skills. Here are some communication skills. We can use some I statements, and we can talk about these things and work on these things. And then sometimes people have to acknowledge that this relationship is toxic. We are toxic together, and this is not right. And what's best is to end this relationship. For some reason, this just is not working. And it can be really hard for people to walk away from relationships. But intimate partner violence is very real. I also agree that's not a diagnosis. It's not something I've ever diagnosed somebody with. It is something that I've talked with clients about. And survivors, it takes a lot for people to leave. And so if you have experienced anything, here are some resources. I'll also put them in the description on this video, because I think this did bring up a lot for people that have experienced things in childhood or in adulthood, or if they are in a toxic or destructive relationship. And within therapy, within working with people, I think there are ways to find safety within it. Emotional abuse is often the hardest to talk about, or psychological abuse, because it's very difficult to prove. And those things often don't leave a mark. That is often very damaging to a person's self-esteem, to their identity, and safety within a relationship is incredibly important. Here are some signs that a relationship is not safe. And if you have any of these, like I said, please reach out and talk to somebody, because you deserve more. You deserve safety. And if you do have a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder or narcissism, narcissism is the one I don't see a lot of people that are diagnosed with narcissism present to therapy. There is somebody on TikTok, I forget his username off the top of my head, but he's a recovering narcissist who has done his own work and likes to educate people on the signs and symptoms of narcissism. And he's very self-aware in a way that some people with that diagnosis are not, because it is something that people can get treatment for. Often people don't change. So that one is a bit harder. I've seen a lot of success with people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I haven't seen a ton of people diagnosed with histrionic personality disorder in my own personal practice. It is common for people with that diagnosis to go into fields where they are in the spotlight. They are putting on a show, and within my experience, they were often within their family. They were the one that relieved some of the tension in the family with their behavior, and that being seen was a way that they stayed safe. Working through healing a lot of that trauma, that can be incredibly important as people move forward. But just because the jury found the way they did, where it was mostly in favor of Johnny Depp, they did find one claim that his lawyer, they did find for her for one. I don't think that this means that victims can't be believed. I also don't think it means that victims have to be perfect, that somebody that survived the most horrific things, that they don't have to be perfect. They just have to be honest. And the credibility of Amber Heard, I don't know anything about whether it was true or not, I can say sitting back and watching, it was easy to question some of the things that were said and some of the things that her experts said. Things just weren't adding up and it just wasn't making sense. And Johnny Depp's side was able to portray things in a way that just, it seemed to make more sense. The people that testified on his side just seemed to be a little bit more likable. Like it just went a little bit better, and little things like that can really add up with a jury. Let me know your comments. What did you think about the trial? And I would just caution people to not share their own personal stories too much, because sometimes that can be triggering to other people watching. If you have any things that you would like for me to cover, please put them in the comments below. Subscribe and be sure to check me out on TikTok and Instagram. I hope you have a great day.